In October 1996, firefighters in the northeastern village of Leadgate extinguished rapidly growing flames at the end terrace home of a popular and successful 27-year-old woman who lived alone. Soon after, the homeowner would be found deceased in her bed. The cause of death, however, was not the fire. The victim had been bound and stabbed over 40 times. 2 years later, and only a couple of miles away, an 18-year-old college student was found murdered, having been hit several times over the head with a hammer. The owner of the home within which she was found would go on to be the prime suspect in both investigations, and rumours circulated that he was responsible for more killings within the local area. Following a week-long manhunt, the suspect was found dead, having taken his own life. Police remained confident he didn't act alone in the first murder, meaning they had more questions to answer. Welcome to the Crime Portal. These are the cases of Julie Smailes and Rachel Tough. Shortly after 2 a.m. on Wednesday, the 30th of October 1996, calls began to alert emergency services about a fire in progress at a property on Wingrove Terrace in Leadgate, a small village with a population in the low thousands situated in County Durham, less than 2 miles northeast of the town of Consett and roughly 14 miles southwest of Newcastle. Smoke was billowing out of the end terrace house, yet there was no noise coming from inside. At approximately 2:25 a.m, firefighters arrived at the address and forced entry into the property. Unfortunately, the lack of cries for help from within were not due to the house being empty, but because the sole resident of the property was found dead in an upstairs bedroom, 27-year-old Julie Smailes. It was immediately apparent that Julie had not died as a result of the fire. Her wrists had been bound, she had been strangled before being stabbed 30 times in the back, and a further 15 times in the upper chest and abdomen. Several fires had been started throughout the property to cover the tracks of the person or persons responsible for taking Julie's life. It was also determined that the perpetrator or perpetrators had crudely attempted to stage a break-in. Julie Smailes was born in December 1968 to parents Joy and James. She was the couple's second child, following their eldest daughter, Wendy. The family lived in the Grove area of Consett, with the two sisters attending Moorside Comprehensive School. One of Julie's school friends would later tell the Northern Echo newspaper, quote, "I will always remember Julie as a very spirited girl who was popular with all the teachers. She had a great sense of humour and was remarkably talented. She was very clever and gifted in a lot of ways." It was during Julie's time at Moorside Comprehensive that she witnessed her parents' divorce. Julie went on to live with her father, with her sister Wendy living with their mother. Despite living separately, the sisters maintained a close bond. Their father sadly passed away in 1992, with both sisters maintaining a good relationship with their mother. As her time at school came to an end, Julie decided against higher education in favour of enrolling on a youth training scheme, allowing her to earn a wage. At the age of 18, Julie began working at Sun Microsystems, an American technology company best known for developing computer hardware, software, and other IT services. Starting her career on the assembly line of the company's factory located in Greencroft, just a few miles east of Consett, Julie's hard work and intelligence saw her gain a series of promotions, ultimately earning a management position. Julie was popular with her colleagues, one of whom later shared the following with the BBC.
Julie's one of the nicest people I know. She used to say if I ever had a problem of any sort, whether it was private or to do with work, I just had to go and tell her. Last time we went out was for my birthday. She's the first one on the dance floor. She was. She was the last one to leave as well. She's just so full of life. It was unbelievable.
Julie balanced her blossoming professional career with a busy social life. She was particularly close with her sister's son, Dean, and in her spare time enjoyed attending raves. The 27-year-old had lived alone at Wingrove Terrace for 5 years up until her death. Julie's mother was key in helping investigators to build up a timeline of her daughter's movements on the day of the murder. Joy and Julie always spent Tuesday evenings together, and the 29th of October in 1996 was no different. After Julie finished work, she drove to her mother's house in her black Vauxhall Astra Merit. The pair then drove the short distance to Julie's home on Wingrove Terrace. Like many in the UK, particularly those in the northeast, the evening was spent watching Newcastle United's 4-0 UEFA Cup victory against Hungarian side Ferencváros. At the same time, Joy was helping her daughter to make a new set of curtains. After they were finished, Julie grabbed her camera and snapped this picture of her mother in front of their new creation. Shortly before 10:30 p.m, Julie drove her mother home before returning to Wingrove Terrace. This gave investigators a window of roughly 3.5 hours in which the murder could have taken place, no earlier than 10:30 p.m. and no later than 2:15 a.m, when emergency services were alerted to the fire in Julie's house. In the days following Julie's murder, officers carried out extensive searches of the streets and fields around Wingrove Terrace to try and locate the knife used to stab the 27-year-old. Their efforts were unsuccessful. Public appeals resulted in 3 key witnesses providing information on people seen in the area close to Julie's home on the night of the murder. Not long after 10:30 p.m, a taxi driver dropped off 3 men in their 20s on Willow Crescent, a few streets away from Julie's home. They walked off without paying the driver and were asked to come forward by police. At around midnight, a local man was out walking his dog following a shift at work on a field at the rear of Wingrove Terrace. Despite the darkness, he saw a man walking on the opposite side of the field who was whistling and may have been walking a dog of his own. Finally, a woman in her 20s was spotted wearing a duffel coat described as hurrying away from Julie's home. Another key witness provided information of an incident that occurred 2 weeks prior to the murder. A local man came forward and told investigators he was walking past Julie's home and noticed a dark blue or black Datsun Stanza parked on the driveway. The witness found this unusual, as he'd never seen a car parked on Julie's drive previously. Stood next to the vehicle was a man described as being around 5 feet 3 inches tall, in his late 20s to early 30s with a stocky build. The man was rummaging around in a duffel bag on the ground, and when the witness greeted him, he said to have tried to hide the contents of the bag. The man on Julie's drive, the whistling man, the lady in the hooded coat, and the 3 men who walked off without paying their taxi fare don't appear to have ever been traced. Unfortunately, leads began to quickly dry up, despite a £10,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Julie's killer being put up by her employer, Sun Microsystems. Towards the end of November 1996, Julie's sister Wendy and her partner, Stephen Nelson, were arrested and questioned for over 35 hours before being released without charge. Little has been reported about the reason for the pair's arrest, although Wendy did admit publicly she had rowed with her sister prior to the murder. Despite this, she vehemently denied any involvement and would go on to make a plethora of appeals for information in the coming years. Julie's funeral took place on December the 18th, 1996, at Christ Church in Consett. Sun Microsystems closed their factory as a mark of respect, with many of Julie's colleagues in attendance alongside family and friends, totaling over 200 people. Reverend Joe Hogarth encouraged mourners to remember Julie for her love of life, and not just the tragic way in which she was killed. He shared a motto that Julie had composed: "Success is not a destination, but a journey." Following the service, Julie was laid to rest at the nearby Black Hill Cemetery. As 1997 began, the investigation was still in full force, with a team of around 30 officers on the case. In an attempt to gain further information from the local community, letters were delivered to every house in the Leadgate area, written by the man tasked with leading the investigation, Detective Superintendent Bob Hall. Unfortunately, this and a subsequent appeal from DS Hall the following month resulted in no new leads. Another month went by before it was revealed investigators were exploring the possibility that Julie could have initially met her killer via a personal advert placed in the Love Lines column of the Northern Echo newspaper. In an era long before online dating, it wasn't uncommon for singles to place adverts in the hopes of meeting a new partner. Julie had placed the advert in September of 1996, just over a month prior to her murder, and is said to have received around 40 replies. Investigators worked closely with the publishers of the newspaper to trace those that had reached out to Julie, but this proved largely unsuccessful as many had provided false details. It was also revealed at this time that Julie had a boyfriend when she was killed. It remains unclear if police were aware of this detail previously. Julie's boyfriend was later identified as 31-year-old Peter Nelson from nearby Darlington. The two had met through her advert. Peter was in fact the last person to speak with Julie prior to her death, as the two had shared a 17-minute phone call after Julie returned home from dropping off her mother. Although Peter would later go on to be arrested and questioned, he was soon released without charge. With the investigation struggling, police sought assistance from the BBC's Crime Watch programme. April 1997's episode aired on the 15th of that month, featuring a lengthy reconstruction of Julie's last known movements on the day of the murder, in addition to an emotional appeal from her mother, Joy. DS Hall was interviewed and urged the individuals seen in the area on the night of the murder to come forward. Despite more than 50 calls coming in as a result of the programme, DS Hall went on to describe the response as disappointing. Media coverage dipped until June of 1997, when an inquest into the murder, which had been ongoing since the previous December, drew to a close. Predictably, a verdict of unlawful killing was recorded. Julie's mother, Joy, was outraged by comments from coroner Jeffrey Burt, who stated, quote, "It seems to me Julie's lifestyle put her at risk, dabbling with drugs, attending raves, and living to some extent a promiscuous lifestyle. Although it was common knowledge that Julie attended raves and occasionally experimented with recreational drugs, she was known by her friends, family, and colleagues to be a safety-conscious and responsible individual." DS Hall sided with Julie's mother and would later tell the People newspaper, quote, "She was a single, healthy 27-year-old, and quite honestly, if she'd been a man, it's very unlikely anyone would have made anything of it." Later that year, in September 1997, DS Hall retired after 30 years in policing and gave his final thoughts on the case to reporters, revealing it was his belief that Julie knew her killer and invited him into the house. Quote, "She had clear glass panels in the side of the kitchen door. It means that if she had a late night visitor, then she could see who was outside. I am sure she would not let anyone in unless she recognized them." As the 2-year anniversary of Julie's murder approached, the investigation was described by newspapers as one of Britain's biggest murder inquiries, which had included over 6,700 interviews and over 3,000 vehicle checks, resulting in over 4,600 lines of inquiry. At the time, a prime suspect was beginning to emerge, as police had been given information during the course of a different murder investigation which began just months earlier. On Tuesday, the 11th of August 1998, 30-year-old mother of 3, Michelle Thompson, returned to her home on Warwick Avenue in Consett. The house was quiet, and upon entering the kitchen, Michelle was horrified to find her neighbour, 18-year-old Rachel Tough, on the floor in a pool of blood. A claw hammer lay beside her. Michelle's husband, 27-year-old John Thompson, was nowhere to be found. Paramedics arrived and attempted to resuscitate Rachel, but sadly were unsuccessful. A pathologist later determined the 18-year-old's skull had been fractured by between 5 and 7 blows. Suspicion immediately fell on John Thompson, who was well known to police, having served time in prison for violent crimes and drug-related offences. As Thompson could not be located, a manhunt ensued, and his description was distributed to police forces across the country. The search was brought to an abrupt end the following week, when Thompson was found dead, having hung himself from a tree close to Hounsgill Viaduct, roughly a mile east of his home, which was now a crime scene. He left behind several scraps of paper in a final goodbye to his wife, stating he didn't want to destroy his family's lives any further due to his drug addiction. It has not been reported that his notes contained any information about Rachel's murder. Superintendent John Blake, who led the murder hunt, would later state, quote, "There is very strong evidence that John Thompson was responsible for the death of Rachel Tough, and we are not looking for anyone else in connection with her death. A motive for the killing has never been established. Rachel was a popular and responsible young woman known for babysitting many local children, including those of John and Michelle Thompson. She was in the process of putting herself through college by working part-time jobs. There was no sign a sexual assault had taken place, and although Rachel only lived a few doors away from the Thompsons, she was not known to have been particularly close with John. Despite this, on the day of the murder, John Thompson had been out drinking heavily and called Rachel's home to ask for help with operating his washing machine while his wife was out of the house. It was during the course of the investigation into Rachel's murder that detectives began receiving information that suggested John Thompson could be involved in the murder of Julie Smailes. This in turn led to speculation that Thompson could have admitted to Rachel Tough that he was responsible for murdering Julie and sought to silence her. Thompson was one of thousands interviewed about Julie's murder, although not as a suspect. Some reports state that he was a family friend of Julie's, with others claiming he had sold recreational drugs to her on occasion. On the 3-year anniversary of Julie's murder in 1999, new lead investigator DS Tom Ryan announced that new DNA testing techniques were to be utilised on evidence from Julie's home in an effort to identify those responsible. The following year, it was revealed that a clear link between John Thompson and the murder had been established, although investigators were not yet ready to disclose specific details. DS Ryan commented that detectives believed 2 people may have been involved in Julie's murder and that others had a hand in trying to cover it up. He reiterated their commitment to finding those responsible and said investigators were closer than ever to uncovering the truth. The next major update in the investigation came just days before the anniversary of Julie's killing in 2001, when 30-year-old Darren Willis was arrested and charged with Julie's murder. At the time of his arrest, Willis lived several houses away from the one in which Julie was murdered. Frustratingly for investigators and Julie's loved ones, the murder charge was dropped in January of 2002 due to a lack of evidence. Detectives publicly conceded the inquiry had ground to a halt due to a number of witnesses refusing to give evidence in court. Julie's sister Wendy angrily told reporters, quote, "I am sick of the cowards hiding away who won't say anything. These people should be ashamed of themselves. If they had any decency, they would tell what they know in court." The following month, in February of 2002, another revelation was made public when a local man told reporters that his daughter was killed to prevent her from revealing the identities of those responsible for the murder of Julie Smailes. On New Year's Eve in 1999, the body of 28-year-old Consett resident Emma Kennedy was found underneath Hounsgill Viaduct, close to the spot John Thompson had taken his own life just over 1 year earlier. Police concluded that Emma had also taken her own life. However, North Durham coroner Andrew Tweddle returned an open verdict and said there was no suicide note and not enough evidence to suggest she intended to take her own life. Emma's father, John Kennedy, told reporters in 2002, quote, "The people who killed Julie Smailes murdered my daughter. I am convinced of that. Emma had been receiving telephone death threats, warning her not to talk about Julie's murder. Emma knew John Thompson. They were good friends. She told me he talked about Julie's murder. She became frightened. She said another man connected was on the phone constantly. She was terrified. Items of Emma's clothing and jewellery were found nearby the viaduct, hanging from the same tree where John Thompson was hung. After my daughter's death, I visited Emma's house, and there were signs of violence. Furniture was piled up against a door, as if she had tried to barricade herself in. There was a hole right through the wall from one bedroom to the other. The whole house had been trashed. I believe she was taken to the bridge and dropped off there. I don't think she was murdered. I know she was. Emma left no notes, and she was talking to me just before the day she died. She was okay, and was planning to come to my millennium party. She wasn't like someone on the verge of suicide." Mr. Kennedy wasn't the only one with these opinions, as Julie Smailes' sister, Wendy, also told reporters, quote, "Emma had told me she had received death threats. I believe there is a connection between the murder of my sister and Emma's death, and I have formally complained about Durham Police's handling of this case." Another unbelievable wrinkle to this whole story is the fact that Emma's boyfriend was murdered in August of 1998, the same month John Thompson murdered Rachel Tough before taking his own life. 28-year-old Malcolm Hester was being harassed by a group of men whilst inside the home he shared with Emma Kennedy, located on Briardale in Consett. After deciding to confront the group with a metal bar and a knife, he was set upon. After police found Mr. Hester unconscious on the ground following the fight, he was taken to hospital and briefly kept alive on life support, which was turned off the following day. Although 7 people were charged with killing Mr. Hester, rumours continued to circulate within the community that John Thompson was somehow involved. Despite this, Thompson was never implicated. In April of 2004, a press conference was held at which police officially named John Thompson as one of 2 individuals that killed Julie Smailes. It was revealed that microscopic spots of Thompson's blood were found on Julie's pillowcase and patio door. This press conference resulted in new witnesses coming forward, with police announcing 2 weeks later they'd been given information placing 5 men at the scene when Julie was killed. DS Harry Stevenson, now leading the investigation, told the media, quote, "From unconnected sources who have not spoken to us before, we have been able to build up a much clearer picture of what happened that night. The men who were at the house told others about what took place. We now have the names and will be speaking to them soon." The investigation's momentum continued into the following month as investigators began digging up the back garden of a property near Consett in search of the knife used to kill Julie following a tip from the public. The property, located on Briardale, was previously lived in by Emma Kennedy, outside which her boyfriend Malcolm Hester was beaten to death. It was stressed that the current occupant was in no way suspected of any wrongdoing and had been helpful in allowing investigators to carry out the search, which lasted 2 days. After the search concluded, DS Stevenson would not confirm if a weapon had been found, but did divulge, quote, "Further items have been recovered. They will be forwarded to forensic science laboratories for detailed examination. Despite the revitalized investigation, publicity quickly dried up as no new leads were reported. Sadly, there has been almost zero media coverage of the case and barely any appeals for information ever since, with only one significant exception. By 2013, Harry Stevenson had been retired for several years and was working as a consultant investigator for a firm which he co-founded. At the time, he publicly revealed a possible motive for Julie's murder, telling the Chronicle newspaper, quote, "Shortly before her death, Julie received a substantial payout from shares she had bought in the firm. She received in the region of £19,000 to £20,000, and this news soon spread in a close-knit community. She knew one of the suspects, John Thompson, and as a young single woman living alone, she would have been seen as a soft target for some easy money. But obviously, something went badly wrong, and she was murdered. He went on to state that despite his retirement, he would still receive information about the murder. Quote, "I am still getting emails and phone calls telling me who was responsible for killing Julie. The barking dogs and cats in Leadgate know who was in that house when Julie Smailes was killed, but people are too frightened to speak out. I cannot blame them because one of the suspects is an absolute nutter, but unless the police are given new fresh information, they will continue to escape justice." Unfortunately, John Thompson will never be punished for the murders of Julie and Rachel. While it appears that he acted alone when taking the life of Rachel Tough, several of his associates have escaped justice for their part in the murder of Julie Smailes. The fact that police have been given the names of those responsible but have been unable to charge or convict anyone of Julie's murder could suggest that no other forensic evidence exists, or, if it does, it has not been linked to a suspect. It must be incredibly frustrating for both Julie's loved ones and investigators that witnesses with key information are unwilling to appear in court, and even if they did, their information may not be enough to secure a conviction without supporting evidence. The investigation has been at a standstill for over 20 years, and without new information from the public, it doesn't look like that will change. Julie Smailes was a well-liked, intelligent and independent woman with an exciting future ahead of her, and she is still deeply missed by those that knew her. If you have any information that could breathe new life into the hunt for Julie's killers, or those that police believed helped to cover up her murder, please contact Durham Constabulary by visiting durham.police.uk or call the UK non-emergency number on 101. The Crime Portal is a channel dedicated to exploring murder and missing persons cases. For further information on this case, or to submit a suggestion for future videos, please visit the Crime Portal website. And as always, thank you for watching.